Brian Person here with JD Lasica. We've just wrapped up the inaugural Social Media Breakfast East Bay, and JD is a social media strategist at SocialMedia.biz. Was the speaker, the presenter today. JD, thanks first of all for being here for that.
Thanks, Brian. It was a lot of fun.
And what I wanted to focus on in this interview was actually a topic that you discussed sort of at the end this morning of your comments around the challenges for mainstream media in coming into the social media age, and how are they adapting, for better or for worse, to these challenges. How are they reaching their audiences in new channels? Right. And you have experience as a traditional journalist going back many years, and also more recent years focusing more on the social economy that you talked about today.
Sure.
So that's a sort of a long-winded introduction to get to my question, which is, could you talk about some examples that you're seeing of mainstream media organizations to adapting to social media and these emerging trends in communications?
Right. Well, let me step back for just a second to tell your viewers that, so I was an editor at the Sacramento Bee for 11 years, as the internet was just emerging. Back in the late 90s, we actually had a communication come out from the managing editor's office that nobody was allowed to write anything on the web because the web was seen as the competition to the newspaper. So that was the mindset back there, and over the years I've been trying to get the media industry to sort of step forward into this emerging social media landscape, to become a part of it, not to see it as a competition or as something that's a threat, but it's actually the future. It's the future of news is digital. It's online, right? So how do we get there? So I've been going around to different conferences speaking about the future of media. Nobody has a crystal ball to see what's going to happen down the road a little bit, but what I think needs to happen is this great, what I call the great decoupling. Everybody sort of thinks about news just in terms of its containers, whether it's broadcast news, whether it's in a newspaper, right? But we have to start decoupling the news, the journalism, from the form or the format that it's in, right? So the question is, how do you do that? Because basically, journalism is too important. It's too important to our democracy, to our local communities, to just let it die, to let the old business models wither away. So we're in this really interesting transition period. Nobody sort of knows what what the formula is. There are no silver bullets. People are experimenting with different kinds of forms. Finally, news organizations are coming around to embrace some of these social media tools. A few years ago, there was a steady progression to put a lot of the reporters onto blogs, to participate in forums, to get a communication conversation going with the readership, so that it's not all just about one-way delivery of product down a pipeline to consumers, but to engage the users as co-equal, participants in the news, right? So now we're seeing other kinds of social media forums come into play. So Twitter, in the last year, there's been a huge, amazing uptake of Twitter among mainstream journalists. There are dozens and dozens of journalists now who go onto Twitter every day, talk to their readers, try to figure out how they can be of value on the stories that they're working on. And very often, the readers are the ones who are coming up with some of the best questions to ask interview subjects or to form a news story around. So it's really encouraging to see the news industry embrace some of these new forms.
Now, so we're seeing some good examples. I guess the question that keeps hanging out there, and we weren't able to solve this in the breakfast and probably won't be able to solve it in this conversation, is, so reporters are better engaging with their readers and their community, and they're holding events, and they're chatting with them on Twitter, and they're blogging and answering blog comments. But so that question about the business model, will all of this engagement, is that going to mean that business or newspapers can survive online? What is how do we solve that?
Yeah. Couple of things. One is I think I've made this prediction a couple of times now. I think half the newspapers in the United States, and there are about 1,600 daily newspapers left, will probably be out of business in the next 5 years. That's going to cause a great distress at a lot of the local community level. And there will not be an immediate answer as far as people stepping into the gap that newspapers have traditionally played. But what is happening is sort of a nichification of media. This has been a long-term trend. Newspapers' business models have been built around mass media, around delivering, all these different components of what a newspaper consists of to a general mass, undifferentiated audience. And that is exactly against the trends of where the entire media sphere has been heading over the past 10 years. So newspapers are just caught up in that turmoil, and there's no way or no easy answer to how they're going to pull themselves out of there. But what's going to happen is that out of the local communities, there are going to be other kinds of media forms that are sprouting up. There's a group called Spot.us, which is a form of crowdsourced journalism, and they want to sort of expand this into other local communities where people decide what are the most important stories that aren't being covered in a local community, and then they put up some money to get a reporter to go in and do a story. So that's not something that's really going to scale and get a lot of journalism out of it, but for important local stories, that's one possibility. Another possibility is a lot of the people who have traditionally entered newspapers. I hear this all the time from the young kids. They're afraid to go into newspapers because they don't know that they're going to be around in 5 years, right? So what do? A lot of them are sort of banding together. They're creating their own sort of local community organizations and publications, putting it online, starting with volunteer citizen journalists to go out there into the local community, to open the doors to local people who are creating video just like you're doing, Brian, here, and photos, and a lot of it's not going to be polished journalism, but a lot of it's going to be storytelling, telling what's happening on a local level, and eventually there'll be money behind that. There'll be local merchants, advertisers who come on board and support a lot of these local publications. So that's just one way it's going to happen.
So I guess the thought is that the business models will emerge. It's just going to take some time, and we hope that not all the newspapers are dead by the time that this gets sorted out.
We can't rely on volunteers. We can't rely just on citizen journalism. There got to be people who are paid for a living to go out there and report the news, right? There have been a lot of ideas kicked around. Walter Isaacson in Time magazine the other week was talking about micropayments as one idea of getting people to support local news. There's another idea of getting nonprofits, foundations to support local journalism organizations. But I think it's going to be coming from a lot of different sources. What can't happen is for business as usual, for newspapers to sort of rely on, massification and for national advertising, for classified advertising. A lot of these kinds of sources are drying up, so there have to be a lot of interesting, innovative, creative models. What newspapers have not been good at is innovation or experimentation. Now is the time they have to get off their butts, figure out, here are some innovative ideas, throw them up against the wall. Don't be afraid to fail, but, what you have to be afraid of is just complacency and doing the same thing. You got to try new things.
Great, JD Lasica from SocialMedia.biz. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks a lot, Brian.